Hello, Jono from the French Wine Centre here. Now, last series was called Taste Then Drink, where we would taste and then we would drink. This series will be called Life Advice to Not Follow with me, Jono Hersey. Now, legally, I should probably say don't follow this advice. This is purely built off and thought up from experience. Experience that most people probably shouldn't go through. Now, if you had a fantastic weekend like I did on the weekend, this being Monday evening, you might be feeling a little bit rusty. Now, some people will tell you to go for a run or go to the gym or something like that. But one of the most detrimental things I find after a big weekend is the brain is just a little bit slow off the mark. Now, as one would start an old carburettor car or a lawnmower, a little bit of start your bastard helps. In this case, a couple of glasses of fine Burgundy from Domaine Dubuet Boillot. And if you think and read and discuss the wine while having a glass of Start Your Bastard, what you'll find is you'll switch back on. And if you really want to, just go for a little walk after. That'll get the blood flowing. Your brain will be ticking along. It'll be perfect. So, Domaine Dubuet Boillot, based in Volnay, from a long line of vignerons, I believe about 4 or 5 generations. His first vintage was in 2016. Now, it's very rare to be able to follow a producer in Burgundy along their entire career. The 2016 we have here is Volnay sur Roche, and we also have one of his 17s. Now, the wines since 2016 have already stylistically begun to develop and change. Not saying the 16 and the 17 aren't good, but it's just interesting seeing someone's mind, the way they work, the way they develop, taste, and grow as winemakers. Now, Volnay has historically had an up and down pass. It has gone through periods where it's been known as the greatest red wine village in the Côte d'Or, including from the Côte de Nuit. Then it's gone through times where it's been very not sought after. Now, reason being is it's a very fragile wine, very delicate. It sits just below Pommard, a little bit south of Pommard, a little bit north of Meursault. It makes 100% red wine. And Pommard, its northerly neighbour, makes very sturdy wine. Now, with Volnay's popularity, they used to call it the eye of the partridge, Huile de Perdrix. Now, that being its very, very light colour. It was perfumed, easy to drink and enjoyable. Now, where that was not beneficial was when the wine merchants used to come along and buy the barrels of wine and sell it off the back of the cart, and the wine that was fragile with a lot of ullage wouldn't last. And during those periods, that's where Pommard, his northerly neighbour, would be more popular, a sturdier, more robust wine through a lot of clay and more fertile soil that came down the Aventoune River. Now, with modern advancements in winemaking and obviously bottles, it is a lot easier to keep Volnay fresh. Now, a lot of people will say Volnay and Chapelle are very similar, in which they are, whereas Chapelle a little bit further north often has a sort of a darker fruit spectrum. So can Volnay. There are, 4 large main different parts to Volnay, all with different characteristics. Some have a darker fruit spectrum, but they all have a perfume. Now, Volnay sur Roche is high on the hill, just north of the village, as high as it can be, just above Premier Cru Carelle and just below the forest. Now, when vineyards are that high, they're quite often village rated rather than Premier Cru because it's such thin soil. Now, what that does is it creates very good drainage, which is great during wet years, but not very good during warm years. But it's limestone will still, and this is a high limestone content vineyard, will retain enough water to last through even warm years. In 1953, Maxime's grandfather sold his motorbike and actually bought that plot and planted it. Now, the second wine we're trying here, Carelle sous la Chapelle, is right next door to Champagne, which is arguably in a cluster of the best vineyards, Premier Cru vineyards in Volnay. Cayret, Clos de Duc, etc., all absolutely exceptional. Now, Carelle sous la Chapelle shares the same soft limestone, marl, composition as Champagne. And Champagne is absolutely beautiful. A little bit more weight than the Sir Roche. Now, in particular, if we taste the Sir Roche, it's unexcusably Volnay. It does have quite a sweet, fruited edge. Being his first vintage, his approach was 100% destemmed, and in turn this created a very sort of fruit-forward wine, but it still does have this drive of limestone and tension on the nose. So very perfumed, very fruity, but in the nicest way. Tense. Floral, filled with violets, beautiful blackberry. Now what we're feeling now is the glass is start your bastard starting to work. Automatically after just a couple of sips of wine, I'm already about 15% smarter than I was this morning. On the palate, it's classic, very fine, ripe tannins, very resolved. No austerity, but a beautiful sort of limestone core, very plush with fruits. If you could imagine, very sort of wild red cherries, really quite ripe, not overly ripe in the form of alcohol, but in the form of just plushness and beautiful sweet fruit. Utterly beautiful and drinkable. Now, if we go to the 2017 Domaine Dubuet Boillot Volnay Premier Cru Carelle sous Chapelle. 17, slightly warmer vintage than 16. Now, people don't realise that it had this sort of a nice warmth and was able to ripen, but particularly with the white still held a fine line. Now, being a little bit further down slope, a little bit more warmth, ripened a little bit more. It definitely has a sucrose character, so there's no doubt about it. This is filled with overtly ripe blackberries that almost, as you pick, explode on your hands and stain your fingers. A ripe plum, beautiful little sort of aniseed spice, filled with florals again, and it's tightening in the glass since I first opened it. Again, starting to feel better, probably at about 23% brain capacity. And on the palate, it's just longer and there's more flesh and volume, and it's very sweet fruit and very lush and velvety, but it's still very much in check. That sort of lush and velvety doesn't come from, you know, a lot of oak or alcohol. It comes from just beautifully ripe tannins and fruit. And it really is changing in the glass and incredibly lifted and mineral and just everything that you'd expect from a good Premier Cru Volnay wine. All right, I'm going to finish these and get up to about 84% brain capacity. If you've had a big weekend, I suggest you do the same. Go online and purchase a couple of bottles of Domaine Dubuet Boillot. All the best. Enjoy your life.